It's go time.
Welcome to the Third Down Gamble podcast with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
Gut-wrenching is probably the only way you can describe how Edmonton lost to Hamilton. What are the Edmonton Elks going to be like from here on out? Have they shown enough to improve? Have they shown enough to say, hey, now we can be a team that you have to fear? But they are at 1-6. They got a lot of work to do.
They do. And question number one is, who's the starting quarterback? It's sad that we're into this position already. Trey Ford, they've put so much effort into promoting him as the number one guy. Cody Fajardo has had limited success as well. I don't think either one of them has really solidified themselves as the number one guy. Do you take the experience that Fajardo brings to the table, or do you take the time to nurture Trey Ford, regardless of what the record is on the season?
Cody Fajardo likely is going to get the starting nod for the foreseeable future, partly because you're in a win-based league. It wasn't maybe 40, 50 years ago where you would stay with a quarterback, even if he was having a few rough games. You would hang in there with him and let him figure it out. Now, because of, especially when money's involved, and there's a lot more money involved with the CFL than there was back in the late 60s, early 70s, whatever you want to argue it to be, the pressure points are now getting higher and higher. And it's still a gate-driven league. And so when the Elks attendances, which have actually taken a little bit of a bump up in the last couple of games, they're still not where they want them to be. You've got to do something. And for Trey Ford, as much as they wanted him to be the franchise quarterback, patience, as indicated by several pundits, was going to be wafer thin with him. Most likely because they did have Cody Fajardo in the backfield, but mostly too that if he wasn't producing at all, they were not going to hesitate, because it just, you can't wait any longer. This team needs to make some noise in the West.
There's no indication that there is locker room issues with the Edmonton Elks at this point of the season, but you have to wonder when fingers are going to start pointing one way or another. I'm not 100% sure that Jordan Maksimic has done enough with the offensive packages for Trey Ford to really play to his strengths. There is some potential there to look at what he does better. I've been talking about this since week one, about moving the pocket, getting him out into the open field a little bit more and finding open receivers in that regard. Maksimic doesn't seem to have been wanting to do that and really customize the offense around Trey Ford. Now he's in a situation where Cody Fajardo fits in more comfortably into a Jordan Maksimic system, given that his ability to throw the ball and the experience that he has. There are some other issues with that team as a whole. Keon Julian Grant has now dropped 2 sure touchdowns, one against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, one this past week against the Hamilton Tiger Cats that let that game get away from them. He needs to be better. He needs to step up in those big play moments as well. That's each of those 2 quarterbacks hit him wide open in the end zone and the ball went through his hands. Yes, you can pin things on the quarterback, but it's kind of like pinning interceptions on a quarterback when it bounces off the receiver's hands, hits a defender in the helmet, hits another guy's foot, and somebody scoops it. That shouldn't be against the quarterback. The way the stats work, it is.
It's part of life. You get sometimes the good because of something that happens. You get sometimes the bad because some the way the stats are. Wins and losses, for instance, are very ubiquitous. Everybody seems to want to look at them. But I remember a game where Travis Lulay played part of the first drive in Hamilton, got knocked out of the game. Jonathan Jennings went in, ran the rest of the table with the team until the final whistle, and he was the one to put up all the points. Lulay got the win. He was out there for the first play. That's one of those idiosyncrasies that you live with, but you don't like all the time. So if you're Edmonton in this situation, yes, Keon Julian Grant, I don't know where he goes from here. The drop in Winnipeg was really tough, but this one was absolutely brutal to see. the game on the line, your major move, you've got Deshaun Amos caught behind you. He knows that he's beat, and that ball was right where it needed to be. Now, sometimes players have a preferred side to catch it. In other words, if they face right or they face left, they're more comfortable in one of those two ways. Maybe for Keon Julian Grant, it was a possibility that he likes to catch the ball over his right shoulder as opposed to his left. We don't know that for a fact. I know personally I have a bias one way or the other how I like to catch the ball, and it's typically looking to my left. The Elks, in terms of all of this, though, at 1-6, you're looking up. You've got the BC Lions 2 wins ahead of you. Bombers are 3 wins ahead of. You've got to make some noise somehow. And the problem that you have is you've lost the season series in this mix. That makes it doubly difficult because now you have to get above these guys, not just tie them in the standings, but get above.
That's exactly it. And you start looking at the standings in the season series. We'll get into that a little bit later on with teams and where they're at in season series as well. They're in an uphill climb. Third place at this point seems quite a reach. The crossover might still be in play. As you mentioned, they're 3 games now behind the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. The Bombers have had 2 byes already as well, so they've got that kind of extra game in hand. You start looking at trying to leapfrog them in the standings. 2 teams in the East are only 1 win ahead of you at this point, so you've got to keep that in mind. The playoffs aren't out of the picture, and they won't be for some time. However, being competitive and limping into the playoffs are 2 different things.
It's great that you're only 1 game behind the 2 teams that you need to catch in the East. However, you can't be 5th and do it. You have to be 4th. That is irrelevant to them right now. They've got to catch the BC Lions. That's where everything happens. And having lost that seasonal series already, they've got to figure out a way to really catch fire. The Elks staring this again. And there's been so much chatter about the Elks name change and it's cursed and all this crap. I'll give them a little bit of history here. When this was at the end of the Jackie Parker era of Edmonton, way back in the 60s. In 62, they went 6-9-1. And in 63, 64, and 65, they went 2 wins, 4 wins, and 5 wins. They didn't make the playoffs again until 1966 at 6-9-1, which is a very interesting stat. When you've got losing seasons, quit pointing at name changes or superstitions and stuff like that. Look at the top. Who's running the show and what did they do? How did they guide you? How did they bring you to this point? And you've got to go back to right around the pandemic when things started to go off the rails with this football team. Jason Moss goes in 2017, takes the team to the West Final. They come back in 2018, don't miss the playoffs, but they're 9-9. After that, they fire him and everything seems to move with Jamie Elizondo. Scott Milanovic never coaches it down. All kinds of things. And then Chris Jones comes in, blows up the team, and then is let go in the midst of that process. That isn't anything to do with the naming. That has everything to do with management and how they've run this enterprise.
It does. And we have to keep in mind that there is a brand new management regime in place this year as well. Sometimes you catch lightning in a bottle and things go well quickly. We look at, and even without massive changes, the Calgary Stampeders, what they've done on field this year. Sorry, hold back. Without massive changes to the coaching staff and management, the Calgary Stampeders have erased 2 abysmal years and are in peak form this season through the 1/3 mark. Even look at the Saskatchewan Roughriders with the Corey Mace hiring and the progress that they have made reasonably quickly and are now number 1 overall in the league. It's not the norm for everybody to make giant leaps forward that quickly. There does need to be some patience. I still believe that the Elks organization has some great people in place, in their head coach, in their president, their general manager. There's some pros and cons there that I won't necessarily dive into tonight, but they have some solid leadership there. They need a little bit of time to develop. I know Elks fans are frustrated given what has happened over the last several seasons, and they're still looking at that wins and losses. You have to look at this was a turning of the page this year. It's what happens in 26 and 27 that's really going to show if these were the right moves to make.
I agree with you completely. Like the regime now that's in place, you've got to give them the chance. This is not their fault that they've inherited a team that has not made the playoffs in a few years. They have to be given a clean slate and go about it their way. Now, saying clean slate doesn't mean you turn over the team, because you keep doing that and you recess to the mean. You just go right back to where you were. You start over. Oh, guess what? You can start over again. You've got to settle down and start developing players. And they talked about bone a lot of times, and that's back in the early 2000s when that team was going to Grey Cups and things like that. They talked about bone, and basically it was a structure sort of thing. It was core people leading, putting everything they had into that franchise. And this is what they're looking for again. But it's going to take time. You have to let players be there for more than 2 seasons to really start infusing a culture of, and whatever that name you can apply. But you need to let them do that. You talk about the Saskatchewan Roughriders and the fact that they're in first place, but what has been constant? Their president and their GM through all of this. They've allowed them to make their mistakes. They've allowed them to grow. And one of the things that Jeremy O'Day is highly respected in CFL circles. You don't let good people walk away. They will bring good people with them. And he has done that with Corey Mace. Now, okay, it was a miss with Craig Dickinson, but that you could say was a bit of a tough situation. The way that Chris Jones left the team, very short timeline to get that season underway. Dickinson had been there, knew everybody. They said, okay, we'll give you your chance. So he was probably due that opportunity anyway. It just didn't work out. O'Day this time went out and said, I'm going to find the one I want. And that happened to be from Toronto. This is sort of what I'm thinking in the long term the Elks will probably get to. In the interim, they did an overhaul of their defense. They're struggling to figure out what they're doing with their quarterback. These are not signs of a team that is going places. Now, you could say, okay, but wait, the Calgary Stampeders revamped their defense and put in a brand new quarterback. Yes, but that quarterback, there's no question he's the starter. And that defense, they also brought in Bob Slowick, who's just done a fantastic job with that defense. But these guys, a lot of them were there with the Stampeders last year. They just weren't the penciled starters for the whole season.
Talking about the Elks defense, they did go out and make some big flashy moves. We've seen bits and pieces of the potential that Elks defense has. They just need to find that consistency. They've been struggling to keep it consistent, even not just game to game, but even within a game. And I know our friends at the Turf District talked about in game 1, they played great for 1 quarter. In game 2, they played great for a half. In game 3, they played great for 3 quarters. And they just needed to put it all together. And they just haven't quite got there yet. They've had their one win was a complete game. These last 2 losses, they've kept it close. But even now you're looking at playing 55 great minutes and losing it in the last 5. This was a carryover to what we saw in some of the Chris Jones regime as well, that they just couldn't close. And they need to have an attitude adjustment to get across the finish line.
That comes with experience. You have to grow together to get there. You can't turn everything over. This is where I'm getting to. You need people that have the steel, the metal, to stand in and say, this isn't going to happen on my watch, and we're going to make sure that we're going to come out with a victory. Look at the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. As much as they've struggled this year and probably struggled last year as well, but that management team has been together through it all. They have got good people in the right positions. It just breeds success because good people, again, as I say, bring along good people. Stability is one of the things that players like. They don't want to have to come into a franchise and wonder who the head coach is going to be next year, because then they got to start thinking about their future. Do I want to follow the guy that was just here and go where he went, or do I want to stay here and see what happens?
One other comment I'd like to make about the Elks, and especially this last game, as they say, the other team gets paid to play as well. And if there's a quarterback in this league that you want in the final 2 minutes to lead your team down the field to victory, it's probably the one that they faced this past week with the Hamilton Tiger Cats in Bo Levi Mitchell. 2 weeks in a row for him, he has led the team back late in the game to pull off the victories. As much as you can point fault at the Elks and their inability to close, you have to give props to that Tiger Cats offense for doing what they needed to do to close this one out.
We knew going into the season that offense would be something special once Kenny Lawler got out there. Now you could say, okay, Kenny Lawler's stats against the Elks weren't that great. What does Kenny Lawler do by being out there? Turns a lot of eyes to him. Other players, Keandre Smith, for instance, went off against the Elks in the previous week against the Lions because all the attention was being paid to Kenny Lawler and Tim White. You've got two bona fide stars running routes. Somebody's going to be catching the football.
Quarterbacks dream of finding a capable receiver in one-on-one coverage, and you're exactly right. Kenny Lawler draws the attention of defensive backs. The safety out of habit cheats his way, and that brings the whole other side of the field open into one-on-one coverage, allows guys like Keandre Smith to get open and make the big plays.
We saw that in spades against Edmonton, and especially with Keandre Smith going off against the BC Lions. When you've got so much talent, and one of the things too that we don't talk about is that offensive line. Bo Levi Mitchell is not under duress for the most part in a football game. He has time to step up in the pocket if he wants to. He can move a little bit if he wants to. He does get some pressure, but he's basically playing with a clean jersey on his back. He's not getting driven to the ground. When you've got that means time. That means you can look over what the defense is doing. Players break clear of their coverage. That gives you an opportunity to exploit what is happening on the field. And if there's anyone that loves to do it, it's Bo Levi Mitchell. He came out of Calgary for years. He was a stand in the pocket, sling it as far as he could throw it down the field and just make explosive plays to destroy other teams. With Hamilton, he's not expected to do that as much, but he still does it anyway.
After a disappointing loss to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the Toronto Argonauts have made a couple of roster moves this week, acquiring Spencer Brown in a trade with the Edmonton Elks, as well as bringing in veteran Canadian offensive lineman Ryan Sevier and two other players as well. Is this an indication that the Argos do not feel they were as strong as in previous seasons, or are they just managing that roster based on some injuries that they've suffered as well?
Injuries have been a huge dictate, and especially ones involving people going to practice. Ryan Hunter, what a brutal situation. I don't know what his status is going forward. Is he out for the season? I don't know how tough those injuries were on him. The trade for Brown, that's an 8th round pick that goes the other way to the Elks, is a sign that their running game just isn't cutting it. If you're the Toronto Argonauts, one of the things that they need to do, and we've talked about this incessantly, is they've got to get a running game working. I think they've got the horses up front overall to move people out of the way to get a running game going. I don't know why it hasn't happened. It's not like Dinwiddie has said, no, we're never going to run again. He wants it to happen. They just seem to, unfortunately for them, fall into situations where they're not getting any success early, so he starts chucking the ball. And Devontae Coxie goes down the field. Yeah, you've got a bona fide threat that you can use and take the lid off of teams. But the Argonauts, it seemed to me, especially in that fourth quarter against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, that offensive line really didn't bottle up Willie Jefferson. And of course, he had all those knockdowns.
The Ryan Sevier signing obviously indicates that Hunter may be out longer term as well, shoring up that offensive line. The Argonauts made some interesting moves, to say the least, in training camp with the release of a couple of veteran running backs in Kadeem Carey and Kevin Brown. Brown, we see, has been picked up this week as well by the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So obviously there are teams that still believe he's a capable back in this league. The Argos wanted to go a bit younger in that position, and I think that has really been a downfall of their running game.
Toronto, until that is rectified, and it's not like Nick Arbuckle is a bad quarterback. He's a good quarterback. But when you're throwing as many times as he is, you get predictable after a while, and defenses start to change how they approach you. Willie Jefferson feasted on him, and when you're down all the time in that game against the Blue Bombers, other than the early interception, the Argonauts were sort of pushing against a wall for most of the night, and it just caught up to them in the fourth quarter.
It did, and I'm going to focus a little bit on Willie Jefferson in the game he had. It was the highest ranked PFF performance since they started keeping those stats in the CFL at a 99.3. He had a forced fumble, 4 knockdowns, a tackle, and a tackle for loss. That was one of the best games that you will see from a defensive lineman. Maybe his sack numbers were a little bit low in comparison to what we've seen from him and other great defensive ends, but those knockdowns just continued to knock the wind out of the Argonauts' sails.
It felt like the Argonauts, every time Arbuckle was going back to pass, that those great big wings were coming out. But one of the things that I couldn't understand with Arbuckle, though, is if you come to the line and you see where Willie is, you know that you've got read 1, read 2, or option 1, option 2, option 3. Just look to the other side of the field instead. Go to your right if he's on your left. I didn't understand throwing through him, how that was ever going to solve anything.
Well, it certainly didn't solve anything, and that was the problem for Arbuckle.
Very true. And it's big for the Blue Bombers because they busted up a 3-game losing streak. And of course, now they've got their quarterback coming back. Stanley Bryant is also coming back. So you got Zach Collaros and Stanley Bryant both practicing with a big game in Calgary coming up. Even though they've lost the season series with the Stampeders, a win here would put them tied with the Stamps in the standings, and that's massive. But for Winnipeg, that win sort of broke the skid that they were on. And part of it was the offense was ineffective. And the other part of it was the defense was getting torched over the top. Well, the Argonauts still torched them over the top, and the offense still didn't do it. It was special teams and turnovers that really lifted them, but we can get more into that. They won the game. You can win it one of 3 ways: offense, defense, or special teams, and Winnipeg just chose the latter.
It was realistically one receiver that beat them over the top consistently. And that was Coxie all night long as well. And there was not a defensive back in that Bombers defense that could match up height-wise or skill-wise with Coxie on this night. And it didn't matter who they put out there. He was winning those one-on-one battles and just put up yards. It was a great show by him, and back to the drawing board for that Winnipeg secondary.
Devontae Coxie, rare form, getting 2 offensive pass interference calls, one at the end of the game, which was massive. And I still kind of thought, looking at that, you could have gone and just said defense did it first. He responded. I don't know how you assess one was worse than the other, but they know the rules better than I do.
It looked like there was quite a bit of contact and quite the tug on the front of the defensive back's jersey as well, pulling him off. And that's one of the things they look for on defensive pass interference, is if you're turning a player or preventing that arm from coming up. It was pretty clear in this one that there was more than just incidental or hand fighting contact. There was quite the tug to remove the defensive back from the play.
I won't argue that. Coxie did give as much as he got with Bond. At that stage, that was a tough one for the Argos to swallow, and it certainly killed any chances that they had of scoring quickly and then trying, which was going to be long, but scoring quickly even with a field goal and then trying to get a short kick and then trying to go for the major, because by rule in the last 3 minutes in the CFL, you score a field goal, you score a touchdown, you have to kick off. And that's to make sure that teams have that option to them of recovering an onside kick.
Hi, I'm Dave Naylor, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble podcast.
We start with games in week 9 that were played on the last weekend with the Stampeders in Ottawa. The weird thing about this is that even though Ottawa has a really poor overall record, but they beat the West. And one of the things that they did in the last 4 meetings prior to this was defeat the Stampeders. They've now run it to 5 in a row in a game that they dominate and win 31-11. Now, to be fair to the Stampeders, this was PJ Walker's first start in the CFL. And despite some opening jitters, I thought overall he did well until he threw a pick 6 on a sideline pattern that he shouldn't have thrown to the inside. He should have thrown to the outside. We all saw the breakdown of that. That really turned the game once and for all against the Stampeders, and they lose in Ottawa.
It's funny how some teams just have another team's number. As much success as the Stampeders have had so far this season, and the lack of success the Red Blacks have had, their 2 wins on the season have both come against Calgary. You can look at the situations of these games as well. The first one in Calgary was terrible weather. It was wet, windy, and cold. Anything can happen. The Red Blacks eked out a win in that one. This game, Drew Brown was back, looking healthy and leading that Red Blacks offense. And they really dominated the Calgary Stampeders for the most part. You mentioned PJ Walker, 20 of 37 for 273 yards and a touchdown, but 3 interceptions. So he did struggle with his first CFL start. He didn't look completely lost out there. Some things to work on, but all in all, a strong performance by the Red Blacks.
His counterpart on the other side, Drew Brown, goes 19 of 27, 225, an interception and 2 touchdowns. But again, a defensive touchdown via interception, a big marker, and it continues on, although the Winnipeg-Toronto game does put a caveat to it. For Ottawa, that snaps their losing streak. They finally win at home, which was massive for them. And one of the things that we haven't really touched upon with the Red Blacks is they're starting to get players back. They have been, more than probably any other team in the league, snake bitten by injury, up to a point where they had 11 players out of the starting lineup at the beginning of the season. That's almost half your team out by injury. That's almost ridiculous to have to face. Now that they're getting these people back, they're starting to settle down. This win, it was dominant. Granted, they were down 3-0 after 1, but they took off in the second quarter, went 17 points on the Stamps, and went from there. And for the Red Blacks, it's huge because, again, they've got massive Eastern Division matchups coming up in the next few weeks. In fact, everybody, it seems like, is facing an opponent they have to defeat if they want to get anywhere. Calgary did what they could, but they were hurting too. Let's face it, 3 of their starting receivers out before this game started.
And this is what you expect from the Ottawa Red Blacks on offense when they have everybody back in the mix. Eugene Lewis had a big game. Drew Brown, as we said, threw for a couple of touchdowns. Justin Hardy had another solid night as well. So there are a lot of weapons on that Red Blacks offense when everybody is in the game. William Stanback, veteran running back as well, 13 carries for 52 yards. So you've got some of that stability, and it allows everybody to get involved in the offense. Brown hit 6 different receivers. We had 5 different players rushing the ball for the Red Blacks in this one as well, including Dustin Crum touchdown. Really well-rounded effort, and it has to feel good for the Red Blacks to not just get this win, but to get one at home.
And we don't talk much about Tommy Condell and his influence in Ottawa, but he's sort of now, with his quarterback, Drew Brown in, he can call a slightly different game, a little bit more downfield attack. And Tommy Condell, he's a pretty good offensive coordinator. I mean, look at the numbers he put up in Hamilton when he was there. Overall, the Red Blacks, I think if you're anybody facing them in the next 5 to 6 weeks, if they continue to get healthy, I'd be looking at them going, uh-oh.
Game 2, Friday Night Football, saw the return match as the Toronto Argonauts headed to Winnipeg to take on the Blue Bombers. As we mentioned, a lot of not necessarily offensive touchdowns in this one led the way for Winnipeg. They hold on for a 40-31 win. Trey Vauvel had some struggles early in the season with mishandling kicks, but he was worth the price of admission on Friday night.
Was he ever? 2 returns for touchdowns on kicks really changed the tenor of this football game. The Argonauts, who had come in, they'd had basically a 3-game winning streak over the Blue Bombers in regular season. If you include the Grey Cup, then it's 4. That was Nick Arbuckle, for the most part, that was doing it to them. Now that Winnipeg has that win under their belt, and let's give Vauvel credit. That overhead spider cam, what did you think of it when they showed his first kick return for the score, when he's almost running at the camera and then running past the camera? I'm not so sure if that camera wasn't maybe too close to the ground. I thought he was going to run into it.
It's an interesting look. I like what they've done with some different camera angles. It gives you a different view of the field as well. And as impressive as that kick return touchdown was, I think the real big highlight was the punt return, because it looked like he was kind of tiptoeing along the sideline, not a lot of room. he found an opening and kicked it into high gear, and away he went. A couple of huge plays for him. The Bombers were pretty high on him in training camp as a returner. And despite those struggles, as I mentioned early on in the season, he made up for it in a big way in this one.
It was massive. And the Bombers also get scoring from their defense, and that was massive as well. Winnipeg wins 40-31. You take away all of that, and they're hurting.
Let's look at the line for Chris Streveler, 17 for 21, so 81% completion percentage. You think, okay, that's pretty decent. 173 yards in total, so he's right on that 10 yards per completion that you talk about. 3 interceptions. 2 of those were on some tip plays, some weird things happened. The third one, I'm going to pin as much on offensive coordinator Jason Hogan as I am on Chris Streveler. You've got a 6-point lead at that point late in the fourth quarter. A field goal puts you up by 2 scores. On a first down, they throw a corner out to the shortest receiver, Jareth Stearns, that they have, and he's picked off. That was a poor play call in a position where you did not need to throw that pass. I think a rookie offensive coordinator and a backup quarterback need to improve on that quite a bit.
You could argue that, and it's part of the learning curve for him, let's face it. He's new into this job. It's a lot of responsibility, and you have to think quickly. We do talk about the 20-second clock in the CFL. You basically have about 30 to 35 seconds. Play ends, you got to see down in distance, and then you got to start figuring out, well, what do we want to do here? The head coach may be talking to you saying, I want this, dial up this, or maybe he's not saying anything at that moment. But for Hogan, he called up that play. I agree with you. It was a bit of an all or nothing, like let's put them out of their misery right now shot. And it backfired. It's like cover 0 in the Grey Cup. It happens. You sometimes call a play that you look back in hindsight and go, that wasn't the best. Chris Streveler, though, the one part of his game that really showed poorly, stood back in that pocket so long, and he waited and waited and waited. And he had plenty of time back there, but he waited out receivers to get open. He wasn't trusting that he could put it into a window. He did a couple times. He trusted early in the game, but as the game went on, he sort of held on to the ball. And it's sort of one of the things that Cody Fajardo was accused of, is just hanging on to the ball too long. They give up 5 sacks. And I think a lot of that could be put on Streveler and what he was doing.
I agree with that assessment as well. Like I said, you look at the completion percentage. So when he did throw the ball, he had quite a bit of success. They weren't long passes, and he really relied on Jareth Stearns and Nick Dembski to be those possession and sure-handed receivers, because he was throwing some 10, 12-yard passes into some pretty tight coverage that these guys were hauling in as well.
And Brady Oliveira, who had been a question mark in terms of why didn't they use him more? Well, they gave him the ball 17 times, but he only gets 50 yards, so he's averaging less than 3 yards a carry. I think the Argos heard those calls too, expecting that Oliveira would be getting the football a lot more, and they stuffed him. For the Winnipeg Blue Bombers going forward, you kind of wonder if teams can put an end to what Oliveira can do against you. You better have a healthy Zach Collaros if you're going to really make some headway in the West, because, wow, the Argonauts, that defense, in spite of, you think, 40 points allowed, that wasn't on them. That really wasn't on them. Nick Arbuckle goes 22 of 39, 327. Again, a big night. Oh, well over 10 yards of reception. 1 interception, 2 touchdown passes. And, of course, who else but DeMonte Coxey? 9 catches on 11 targets, 187 yards. Longest was 58, but 2 touchdowns. If he hadn't had a couple of interference calls go against him, who knows what he would have had for stats.
The late game magic of Bo Levi Mitchell leads the Hamilton Tiger Cats back to a 28-24 win in Edmonton against the Elks. Edmonton had all sorts of chances to close this one out, but you cannot let Mitchell get the ball back in his hands with any time left on the clock.
BC Lions found that out the hard way. The Hamilton Tiger Cats, that offense is dynamite. They are a fun team to watch. But as we talked about earlier, Keon Julian Grant, he has a pass. He's basically doing a corner route, so he's heading towards the flag at the front corner of the end zone. He's beaten Deshaun Amos on the play. He's turning back. He's looking for the football. It comes right to him, and what happens, I don't know if he's stumbling a little bit as he catches it or what, but suddenly that ball is bobbled, and The only thing Amos can do is put his hand on his back and give him a little nudge. That's all he does. But that ball is long gone before that. What an opportunity missed. And this is going to eat at the Elks. One of the things you do, though, is pain like that either makes you walk away and diminish, or you get stronger because there's another scar that you're going to carry with you and learn from.
Some positives to take away for the Elks in this one is their running game returned. Justin Rankin had 12 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown. Javon Leake, 4 carries for 26 yards as well. This is something that's kind of got away from them over the last few games. So nice to see them as a team get up over that 100-yard mark rushing the ball.
They really put some more emphasis on it. I totally like that. Again, we're talking about Jordan McSimic, but I don't think that all of this can be put on his shoulders. We don't know, for instance, is Mark Killam, who was used to Bo Levi Mitchell, Jake Mayer, he had quarterbacks that were basically stationary in Calgary. And maybe he has had some influence over McSimic saying, look, I want a pocket passer. If I want him to run, I'll hand the ball off. For McSimic, though, I'm sure, and we think that coaches don't listen to media and don't listen to Twitter and stuff like that, but I think on some level they must, because suddenly that ball was being handed off a lot more.
On offense for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, as we mentioned, Bo Levi Mitchell spread the ball around. 9 different receivers caught a pass. We mentioned earlier, Keandre Smith, 7 catches for 138 yards and a touchdown, was the big star on this receiving core. Tim White had a perfect night, 7 targets, 7 catches, 78 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So that Hamilton offense can beat you in a lot of different ways. Everybody stepped up in that receiving core.
Cody Fajardo goes 20-25 for 257, an interception, and a touchdown. And Bo Levi Mitchell, once again, 30 of 42. 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. The other thing that we can talk about is Edmonton getting stuffed at the goal line. That was huge in that football game. We forget that there was another opportunity when they had the ball deep. They brought in their backup quarterback, Cole Snyder, to do that old hammer it through the middle or the side, whatever they can find. First time, looked like he got in, but upon review, he contacted the ground prior to getting that ball to the goal line. Second time, he went to his left, and Jamal Peters and Reggie Stubblefield met him on the other side and never let him near the line of scrimmage. Huge momentum change in that football game.
For the Tiger Cats, Mark Leggio keeps his perfect season going 0 for 0 on field goal attempts. So he has had a real string of makes, a perfect 4 for 4 on the convert. So a bit of a lighter workload for Leggio in this one, but he delivered when he needed to.
You mentioned the 7 receptions for Keandre Smith, and we go back to the previous week. He had 14 receptions. So that's 21 catches over a 2-game span. You're telling me that Kenny Lawler doesn't have an influence over that offense? When you've got weapons, you can just deploy what you want.
You look at that receiving core, as we mentioned, Tim White had a big night with a couple of touchdowns. Shamar Bridges is capable, as is Keandre Smith. You start focusing now on some of those guys, and that's going to get Kenny Lawler back into those one-on-one matchups. And we know what he can do with a contested 50-50 ball.
And if you're a defensive coordinator, what do? You can't go up and tie their shoes together. So what are you left with? You're just dizzy with trying to figure out all the options that you have to defend against. And thank you to Mr. Mitchell and Mr. White for providing my fantasy points for me, because I won this week for the first time, and since the Titanic was still afloat. It's just kind of fun when all your players come in.
The only thing I had going for me was I picked the Bombers defense, and they had 2 special teams and 1 defensive touchdown. That racked up some big points, but I had a swing and a miss on the receivers.
I don't know why special teams is considered a defensive touchdown. Defense isn't out there. They've kicked the ball. That's a different group of people typically back there to take care of business and run it the other way. And yet, when I talked to Steve Daniel about it, he was sort of the same thing. They kind of view kick returns, punt returns as a defensive play. And I thought, that's kind of interesting.
I guess if you look at it from that pure statistical standpoint, it is the other team's offense still on the field,
technically,
regardless of whether it's kicking the ball or throwing it. From that regard, I guess it counts in the defense column.
I can't argue, because obviously it does. I never would have thought of it that way. I followed this game since I've been knee high to a grasshopper. And never occurred to me that that was a defensive score until I was talking to Steve a couple of podcasts ago, and he mentioned it in passing, and I went, whoa, that's news. And where have I been? A day without learning is a day without living. Anything I can learn on a given day, let's go for it. We finish in Montreal, where the Montreal Alouettes get stomped by the Saskatchewan Roughriders. The Roughriders go down the field in the first drive, score a touchdown, never look back. To be fair to the Alouettes, and we talked about injuries in Ottawa, we talked about injuries in Calgary with their receiving core, but this was the defense, the stalwart of the Alouettes. KB and Anto, just before the game, isn't going to be able to go. So the Alouettes do the shuffle and move a lot of humanity around. Marc-Antoine Dequoy goes out early in the first quarter. More shuffling goes on, and they are stretched to the limit, and the Roughriders just feast 34-6.
You can look at the Montreal Alouettes defense, and rightly so. They did get beat badly in this one. On the other side of things, the offense was incapable of getting any penetration into the Saskatchewan side of the field, if not for the strength of Jose Maltos and a couple of long bomb field goals. They were essentially shut out on this one. They had a 61-yarder and a 54-yarder from Maltos. They failed to really get the ball inside the Rough Riders' 45-yard line all night. And you can look at Davis Alexander being unavailable in this one. McLeod Bethel Thompson gets the start, and really a tough night for that Alouettes offense and defense. Is one of the situations where, other than special teams, they got beat in the other two aspects of the game.
McLeod Bethel Thompson goes 15-26 for 126, never going to cut it, and an interception. Trevor Harris on the other side, almost a pedestrian day, 19-27 for 289 and 2 touchdowns. And of course, the rushing attack for the Rough Riders gets them in around 130 yards of offense. The receiving core, the ball is spread out everywhere. Keyshawn Johnson with 4 catches for 62. The big one, though, is Dante Myers, who gets 136 yards on 5 catches. Just a staggering stat. And I don't think at the beginning of the season anyone thought that Myers would be one of the guys that you'd be talking with that kind of number in terms of how many yards down the field he's catching the ball.
I don't think he was on people's radar for those kinds of numbers either. Joe Robustelli, 5 catches for 28 yards. So he has really stepped into that kind of possession receiver role as well. He's not the first or second option for Trevor Harris. A lot of times when he drops back, he's proving his value in his ability to haul in those passes to move the sticks when needed.
Now, Shane Ray hit on McLeod Bethel Thompson in the fourth quarter, which turned out to be a turnover because it was a third down gamble. But at the time, people thought that there had been a touchdown on the play because of the fumble. But was that a hellacious hit? I thought for sure that he was going to be called for roughing the passer because Thompson came down to the ground so hard. But Ray, if you look at it from the other side, he doesn't really bring his body weight on him. He's got a shoulder on him, but that's about it. But because Thompson jumped to make a pass, that distance exponentiates, as it were. He felt it, and we saw Caleb Evans for a little while. But do we think now that the Alouettes are in big trouble? For instance, Caleb Evans, does he have to start to maybe get things going for them? Because clearly, I don't think the Rough Riders outclass the Alouettes by that much, but seriously, how do you look so bad?
We don't know the full extent of Davis Alexander's injury, but he can't come back soon enough for this Montreal Alouettes offense. He drives that team, and even with the veteran presence of somebody like McLeod Bethel Thompson, he's not the guy that has rallied this team around him. That's a knock that's been following him throughout his CFL career. He can put up good numbers as a quarterback, but is he an inspirational leader? This night against the Saskatchewan Roughriders, he didn't put up those numbers, and he didn't really seem to have that confidence of the rest of the team.
It's an interesting comment that you bring up about McLeod Bethel Thompson, because he is kind of a very intense individual. And I've often thought of him as loving football more than life itself. He just lives for football. And when things don't go right, he gets very, very frustrated, and he'll chirp at the coach. He'll chirp at the offensive coordinator. He just struggles with things going wrong. And this is what I found with him, especially in Toronto, that kind of grated on everybody after a while was, yeah, he could put up great numbers. He could do wonderful things, but he'd get over to that sideline and he'd be mad.
We'll continue to monitor what happens with that quarterback situation in Montreal. It might be time to give Caleb Evans a chance just for that other look and maybe a bit of a fresh start as we wait for the return of Davis Alexander.
Well, the Alouettes have been playing with the fact that they had a great start, but that is starting to wane. And the Ticats have now passed them in the standings. Ottawa's getting healthy. The Argonauts, they're not going to sit back forever. Only got 2 wins to their docket so far, but that's going to start changing quick enough. The Argos are not going to sit tight. And once they start putting a couple wins together, suddenly the Alouettes now were not too far off in the distance, and that could change everything. Hamstring for Davis Alexander, that's probably a good 5 weeks more before he sees the field.
Third down.
Starting off the week is the cat fight as the Hamilton Tiger Cats host the BC Lions. The red-hot Hamilton Tiger Cats are a 3.5-point favorite at home. At home, can they keep this streak going, or will the Lions come into Hamilton and spoil the party?
The Lions need to spoil the party. If you want to stay relevant in the West, you've got to keep up with the Blue Bombers now. That's your next port of call. And for BC, again, season series matter a lot in the West because it looks like it's going to be a dogfight 2 through 4, maybe even 5. We don't know what the Elks are going to do yet. The Ticats 3.5 at home. I kind of like it. However, the Lions are coming off a break, and teams coming off the bye typically win about 6 out of every 10 games that they play. It's higher when they play at home. There's nothing to report in terms of injuries for the Tiger Cats, nor for the BC Lions. It's Nathan Rourke versus Bo Levi Mitchell, which is a great matchup. Can the Lions get out early and put it to the Tiger Cats? They certainly blew the lead against Hamilton in the fourth quarter the last time they played in Vancouver, but they weren't putting the Tiger Cats away early.
There's potential for this one to be a track meet. The over-under is 56.5 points right now. I'm leaning towards the over if Nathan Rourke comes out hot after the week off. And we've seen what Bo Levi Mitchell has done throughout this 6-game winning streak as well. We could be pushing 70 points combined between these two teams. I like what I've seen from the Tiger Cats on this win streak. The home game is going to help them out. I'm picking the Tiger Cats to win and cover that 3.5 points.
You talk about hot. Well, it could be close to 30 at kickoff for that football game. And it's a different type of heat. We on the prairies, when we get up to 30, the humidity is around 30%. When it's out east and they get up to 30, the humidity may be 90%. I don't know that it's much different on the coast. So for the Lions, it may not be that bad. But I kind of like the Ticats in the cover. I just think that Ticats are, especially after 2 games on the road, getting back home, getting in their own confines. They may start a little sluggish, but I think they'll be fine going down the road. And that's a big night for them because they're honoring the MVP of the NBA playoffs as well that night. So that's going to be a lot of extra people in the stands.
That's a huge night for the Hamilton Tiger Cats to honor Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and his MVP season. He's a Hamilton local, has been to CFL games in the past as well, is a self-proclaimed Tiger Cats fan. So I think this is a huge bump for the Ticats and for some more visibility for the CFL to have Alexander in attendance for this game.
Cross promotion is always a win. For the game itself, yeah, I'm Hamilton to cover. I'm good with that.
Friday Night Football, 2 teams that struggled a bit over the last couple of weeks. The Edmonton Elks are in Montreal to take on the Alouettes at Percival Molson Stadium. The Owls, as the home team, are a 4.5-point favorite. They did not look good last week against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They got blown out at home. This is their opportunity to bounce back.
Bounce back is going to be the operative term because, boy, they did not look good at all. Now, Edmonton, didn't look good a couple of weeks ago, and they bounced back, still didn't win. 4.5 at home after what I saw last weekend in Montreal. I don't know if the Alouettes are in a good space right now. I kind of like what the Elks are doing. I wouldn't be surprised if Edmonton not only beats the spread, but goes out and beats the Alouettes. I think they're that close. What they need to do is have Cody Fajardo have a big day in Montreal.
He is coming back to Montreal, where he led the Alouettes to a Grey Cup victory. We've got the battle of the backups, who were the number one guys in the respective cities last year. McLeod Bethel Thompson likely to get the start once again for the Montreal Alouettes. I believe the Alouettes defense is going to send a message in this one. They got beat up last week and frankly embarrassed for that team that has been so strong on defense over the last 3 seasons to give up that many points at home. Look for those big names like Marc-Antoine Dequoy to have a huge night. I'm taking the Alouettes at home, and they're going to come back strong and cover that 4.5 point spread as well.
I'd like to know if he's going to be in the lineup. Of course, we record so early in the week that it's hard for us to get this information. Marc-Antoine Dequoy or KB and Ento, or both of them, are they both playing? Will the Alouettes be ready this next go round? They had Sean Lemon in the lineup. Certainly that allowed them to spell off some players. And this is one of the things that they brought up during the broadcast that we haven't talked about much, but we have touched on it. The Rough Riders typically send 8 defensive linemen into any game, and they rotate and keep everybody fresh. The Alouettes only had 5. That means 1 spare.
It's a philosophy of a team, how you want to manage that roster. This is working for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. We talked before about the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who have nobody on their defensive line. Really, they've got James Waters and Willie Jefferson and Jake Thomas. They're often a 3-man front, so they don't need to have as many players. And all we saw from Willie Jefferson was a near flawless performance. He's got an engine that doesn't quit. So I don't necessarily look at the numbers. You want to make sure, I think more importantly, that you've got that backup offensive lineman. We've seen over the past couple of seasons teams needing to put in an emergency lineman from the defensive side to take over on an offense to cover for some injuries.
You're talking about Micah Johnson with the Rough Riders, and he's done that even this year, where he's come in to play offensive line.
He has, and he's done well. I don't want to take anything away from Micah Johnson, because when he has come in those emergency situations, he's proven himself to be quite capable, but you don't want to rely on that. That Rough Riders defensive line is fun to watch this year and high energy. You're right. What that allows you to do is late in the game, if you're ahead, you can really attack and put pressure on the quarterback and make it really difficult for them to come back.
Using just 4. That's the key. If you don't have to use blitzes, and we saw even with the Toronto Argonauts against the Blue Bombers, they were rushing 4. And they were doing it, getting that Chris Streveler. Calgary Stampeders, another team, don't like to use blitzes very often. They send up 4. Leaves 8 people to do the other work that needs to be done. Stop the running back, keep the quarterback at bay, defend the receivers. The Alouettes, to me, look a little bit fragile. And if you think back to the beginning of that game, even their head coach, Jason Moss, seemed a little bit more frazzled. He was very hair-triggered and getting upset very quickly at the beginning of the football game. You knew that something was off. And I think they were set off by the KB and Ento injury just before the game started. It sort of set their mindset like scrambling, and they just didn't seem to have themselves righted by the time the game got going. I don't think this is going to happen twice. Jason Moss is a good coach. He's going to get things figured out, settle them down, and I do like the Alouettes playing a lot better, but I do think that the Elks are overdue. It would not surprise me, even though the East-West matchup now is almost evened up. I think the West has 1 more win or 2 more wins in the East in cross-division battles. The Elks will add to that total for the West. I really do think that the Elks are ready to take this.
Kicking off the Saturday doubleheader, an important game for both of these 2-win teams to stay alive and take control in this playoff race. The Ottawa Red Blacks head to Toronto to take on the Argonauts. The hometown Argos are a 2.5 point favorite. This is an important early season game between these two.
It's massive. This is massive because for the loser, that's going to be one more win that you have to find in your final 9 games. there just won't be that many left. You got to start doing sort of mathematical equations here where if you want to do X, what does it require? Well, let's say if Ottawa wants to finish first in the East, just for sake of argument, they have to win 5 more games than the Hamilton Tiger Cats. That means essentially from here on out, reasonable expectation in the final 10 games, the Red Blacks have to go 9-1 and the Ticats go 4-6. That's how they finish first. You're looking at probabilities here, and anyone who says games in June don't matter, go chase yourself. They matter massively, and we've seen what Winnipeg in years gone by have done with season series. This year they've had it happen to them. For Ottawa and Toronto, this is gargantuan.
It is, and you're right about the season series. That's exactly where I was going to go next. Winnipeg so far, they did get the season series against the BC Lions, but they have failed to get the season series against the Calgary Stampeders, and they're in that battle with them. Coming down the pipe, they've got 3 games against the Saskatchewan Roughriders over the second half of the season, and that's going to be huge for both of those teams. In this one, I like the Red Blacks on the road. They're getting some pieces back together. They've got Drew Brown healthy. That receiving core is ready to roll. I like that offense better than the Toronto Argonauts offense right now. And for that reason, I'm picking the upset. The Red Blacks come in and win this one.
Argonauts at home play a lot better. It's going to be a new grass field for them when they get there because they've installed a new turf for FIFA for next year. And of course, the Argonauts are going to be on it this year. So this is going to be a brand new turf. Of course, it won't be raining likely, but again, Humidex and all that sort of stuff, Ottawa, Toronto, they're both used to it. The over-under is 53.5 this early in the week. This is crazy. Do you think we're going to see that kind of offense? I think we will. At 2.5, you've heard me say this before, but anything less than 3, because the home team gets a field goal, that means this is a pick 'em. They barely favor the Red Blacks, technically. I think it really comes down to who commits the fewest turnovers. If that's you want a picking point, because the Argonauts defense is rounding into shape. They're getting better. The Red Blacks defense showed some spurts and they're getting healthy. So you got an interesting mix of 2 teams that are finding themselves. It's such a huge game. I'm going to stay with Toronto and their -2.5 at home. I just think they won't make the mistake of having a bad fourth quarter 2 weeks in a row.
Finishing off the week's schedule, the third matchup between the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and Calgary Stampeders in Calgary. The Stamps have won the first 2 and are a 5.5 point favorite at McMahon Stadium. Question marks about quarterback health in this one. Vernon Adams and Zach Collaros, both full participants in practice early on in the week. If they are both healthy enough to go, this should be a good one.
Don't forget that Stanley Bryant, one of the key components to blocking for Zach Collaros, should be back and on the field. He went out, ironically, against the Stampeders when they played there the last time. Calgary at home, there's a little bit of altitude. Let's not dismiss that. And if Vernon Adams is back, the Stampeders at home, they figured out how to beat the Blue Bombers, and they've done it twice. Now, of course, that means the incentive is with the Blue Bombers to make changes and come back at the Stampeders. Turnovers killed them in Calgary the last time they played there. Can't have those. 2 pick sixes were the difference in that football game. Stampeders 5.5 favorites at home. That's big. I'm not thrilled about that. And especially with the receiving problems that the Stampeders have with Jalen Philpott out. They've got Reggie Bagleton out. They've got Damien Alford out. And they've got Clark Barnes out. That's 4 starting players. I'm going to go with the Blue Bombers on this one to get inside the cover if they go out and win the game. But this game's going to be a lot closer than what we saw the last time.
That really leaves Tevin Jones and Dominic Rhymes really on that Calgary receiving core. I'm with you on this one. I think the Blue Bombers were embarrassed by the Calgary Stampeders the first 2 matchups this season. They're going to want to get some revenge. I don't know if I'm picking the Bombers outright. I do believe they'll be at least inside that 5.5, and wouldn't be surprised to see them pull the upset. That would pull them into a statistical tie with the Stamps in the division standings. Like you said, Stampeders have won the 2 games already. They've got that season series. Bombers now need to leapfrog them to get into a situation where they could host a playoff game.
And for the Calgary Stampeders, they've lost a couple of games in a row. It's going to matter to them that they don't start to falter. 5 was the amount of wins that they got in 2024. They're already there. They want to blow through that and get up to 10, maybe 11 wins on the season. You got to sort of stop the bleeding now. It's just the problem is they've got so many injuries. Will Philpott be back? I doubt it. Will Clark Barnes be back? I doubt it. Reggie Bagleton, definitely not. They're just thin at receiver, and we know that Vernon Adams Jr. loves to chuck it deep. Well, if you've only got 2 stout receivers, do the Blue Bombers worry about the rest? And you change your coverages accordingly, right? That's going to make it a lot tougher for Calgary to score. They've brought the over-under on this one down to 51.5. I just think the Blue Bombers are going to definitely get inside that cover. Whether they win the game, that's another question.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble Podcast. Audio worth watching.